Welcome back to another episode of Learning Vue.js the hard way. And by now, I think you know sort of exactly what's going on, so let's just dive straight into it. What we're going to talk about in this episode is that we are going to talk about the array syntax. So, the array syntax for class style bindings, right? So we were talking about CSS classes. So how to get CSS classes into your finally rendered HTML. So how to bind CSS classes through your templates so that they will be rendered out in your HTML, right? And then we have to think about all kinds of stuff like how to do it conditionally and how to maybe render a class based on a variable or stuff like that. So last time we talked about the object syntax. So there are sort of two main syntaxes for handling classes in Vue. And one is the object syntax and one is the array syntax. So just to sort of quickly recap, right? If we go back to the object syntax here, you can see that you can bind to the class property of an element and then pass an object here. And then every key here is the name of the class that will be rendered out into the HTML, and the value here is a boolean, such that if the boolean is true, then that class will be put onto the element. That class with the name, in this case of active, will be rendered out into the HTML. Whereas if the value is false, then that class won't end up in the rendered HTML. Okay, so that's the object syntax. But now if we go to the array syntax, what is then the array syntax? Well, the array syntax is sort of solving a slightly different problem, which I actually started to explain in the last video. So what you can do with that is that you can decouple the name of the class from the identifier that's used to identify that you're talking about that particular class. So that maybe kind of doesn't make any sense. So what I'm trying to say is, if we look at their example here, for example, if we look at their example, I think that's actually a good example. Let's say you have let's say in your application, you want to express the concept of being active in many different places, and you don't want to hard code a particular string that says what it means to be active, right? So maybe, I mean, it's also like it's a slightly contrived example, because you could argue that you could just do find and replace, but then again, active is actually a fairly no, you can't just do find and replace, right? Because active is a very, very common word. So active might be scattered across your code bases, or across your code base, such that you might have variables that are called active that doesn't actually at all refer to the style property. So what you can do is instead that you use this, you invent just an identifier, just a normal name that you use to access a normal key that you will put inside of JavaScript objects, right? And let's say that this is active class. So that's the identifier, right? But the thing that will be rendered out into the HTML is not the keyword active class. It's whatever the keyword active class is pointing to. So if you have the active class, and then you have and then that points to the value active, then that means that the name of your class is actually active. And I didn't actually say this very sensibly. What I meant here before is that notice that these two things are part of the object model, right? So notice that they're saying data here. So data colon and then this object. So again, like this normal stuff, you have the Vue object. Let's actually jump. Sorry, so I haven't opened the correct folder. Let me just jump to the correct folder. No, sorry, not Ramda. I keep making Ramda videos as well, so this is why I get a bit confused. So Vue.js. And then let's just say here are the files that we had. We have an index file and a main.js file, same stuff that we've been working with before. Let's go into Vim. Let's open up main.js. And what I wanted to show is just this, right? I mean, it's the same thing as usual. You're instantiating Vue, or you are constructing a component as up here, like when we're saying Vue.component. And when you are constructing a component or instantiating Vue, you're passing in a bunch of things such as the EL property and methods property and so forth, but you're also passing in a data object. So under the key data, you're passing in the data object, and that has a bunch of data that will be available for use in your template, that will be in scope for your template. So for your template for that particular view. So if you put something here, I mean, it's just arbitrary that they've said active class and error class. We could actually refer to fname here, for example. So we have fname pointing to the value John. So if we wanted to treat John if we wanted to say that, oh, that's a class, we have this class that's called John, CSS class, right? then you could using array syntax specify that we're binding the class property to this array, and in this array I have this value fname, right? And if you put fname there, and I said value, but actually I mean like variable, right? Then you will put whatever is under that variable, which is again like slightly different from the object syntax that we looked at before, because in the object syntax you have the key is the property, the CSS class, and the value is the condition, right? Is like whether it should be rendered or not, is the boolean that determines whether it should be rendered or not. But in this case, we're just specifying a variable, right? And that's not the class. That variable is just saying where to look for the class. Like, so whatever active class, whatever value hides under the variable active class or is contained within the variable active class, that's the class that will actually be put into the rendered HTML. So yeah, I mean, that's pretty cool. And again, like you could use this, I guess, for a multitude of purposes. I mean, yes, you could use this just to sort of locally within any Vue instance to simplify things and in order to say what classes to put onto any particular object. But I guess you could also, as we alluded to last time, you could also sort of make this general class object, or this general object containing a bunch of CSS classes, and then use that in a bunch of places to make sure that you are sort of having harmonized CSS names across your application, if that's sought for, right? Like maybe you want that, maybe you don't want that. But yeah, I mean, as you can see here, you just put this array, you bind to an array, and then you have those properties. So let's just, let's just try that out. If we go to, I guess, yeah, let's go to index.html. Maybe let's open up this file in the browser, and let's make this a bit bigger. And then I guess we should do something else. Let's say we had that party class that we worked with before, right? It's like we constructed this button that you can click and to turn on and off party mode. Again, sorry about this extremely terrible example, but that essentially is just making this text red up here, and that text becomes red because it is endowed with the class, or we add the class party to its class attribute. So let's just maybe do that for, let's say, the list as well, right? So we have this UL containing cart items. So let's add that. So let's say we bind to class, right? Again, remember this is shorthand syntax, so it's shorthand instead of saying v-bind : class. But we can instead just say : class. Oops, class. That's the same thing. Now, what's interesting here is, of course, maybe we should start in that end, actually. Now that I say sort of that, well, we specify this array with a bunch of variables, and these variables determine the name of the class. I mean, maybe that's just a complicated way of saying it. If instead of putting variables here, I mean, remember, these are always just expressions, right? Just sort of sandboxed JavaScript expressions. That means we should be able to just put strings here. And if we put strings here, there shouldn't be any sort of magic. Those should just be the CSS classes that are added, I assume, right? So let's have a look at whether that's the case. So if we say bind to class, and then we'll put an array, and then in this array, let's just put, let's actually just put party, right? So let's put the string party and see if that works. Then that means like if our assumption is correct, that so our assumption is that you can put any expression, any of these sort of sandboxed expressions that we've talked about before, because you can't put just any arbitrary expression, but supposedly you can only put a number of safe expressions. But if we put this JavaScript expression that essentially just yields a string, then that string should be added as a class to this particular UL element, and that means that all of these list items should become red because the class is party. And here in our style sheet up here, we've defined that if you have the class party, then the text color should be red. So let's save this and refresh and try this out. Yeah, and you can see that it actually did turn red, right? And of course, that doesn't actually respond to this set party mode to true or false, because let's figure out, that was from last time, right? How did we manage to figure that out? So we said that, yeah, so we bound to a computed property which is called title style, And then if we go to main.js and look at our computed properties for this particular component, then you can see that the title style returns this dot party, right? So it's based on a boolean, which is it renders this it adds the class party if the property this dot party happens to be true. So it's a bit unfortunate that I named both of these party, right? Because one refers to the style, one refers to the class, and one refers to the model property, right? So maybe I should say something like, is party mode true, right? I'm just being extremely explicit, right? That's the variable in our model object, and this, or data model, and this is should maybe be called something like party class, right? Or actually, no, I mean like party mode or something like that. That's a CSS property, or the CSS class that can be added. But anyways, let's just keep it party. Okay, so index. So maybe we should try to make this conditional as well. And to do that, I think the most sensible thing we can do is probably just to keep reading here, right? Because you've seen now how this, or actually we didn't bind it to a variable. Maybe that's a good thing, right? So what we could do is we could say, instead of binding it to, where was I? Here, party, right? We could just say, instead of putting a string here in this array, we could just say maybe party class, right? And then we're saying, well, I'm just assuming that there is something called party class in my data object. And that means that we, in our data object, need to have something that's called, let's say here, for example, let's say party class. And what should that party class be? Well, that party class, and we know, right? It should be party, essentially, right? So this should still be red then if I refresh, and it's still red, okay? And actually, we can try to refactor this stuff that we had before as well. So instead of hard coding, no, actually we can't. Yeah, that's a bit tricky, because then that's the tricky part of having like the CSS class here as the key, right? Because what we could have done is we could have done something like this, right? Let's say let O be an object, and then we return O in the end, and then we set O party class to this dot party, right? So I mean, we can do it, but it's not very elegant. So now we're saying that the party class is we're using this variable party class all the time, so that if we want to change the party class, we can just change it in one place instead of having to change it in all places. Let me show you. Let's just check if this works first. Oh, actually it doesn't work, so I messed something up. Function this party class. Confusing. I probably just missed a comma somewhere. Let's look at the inspector. Party class not defined. Party class. So party class is not defined. So where am I? Sorry, of course I should say this dot party class here, right? In our computed property. My bad. Let's refresh, and you can see this is still red, and we should be able to toggle still. Yeah, we are still able to toggle. But the cool thing now is, of course, this, that if we inspect these two things now, if we inspect this UL, let's see what class we have here. The class is party. And if I inspect this title up here, you can see that the class is party. But if we now change the value under the key party class, let's say party mode, for example, and then we save that and then we refresh, then you can see down here in the UL, next UL, here, UL, we have the class party mode. And if I set party mode to true, you can see that we also have party mode here, right? So this would be like, I think it spontaneously, without having sort of thought through this any more, I would say probably it makes sense to be able to or sort of to extract this idea of what the name of a given class is in terms of CSS, and then just simply refer to the to the property within the sort of code base. I'm not really making any sense. What I mean is to separate the the CSS layer from the model layer. So in the model layer, we refer to this thing as the party class, let's say, as party class. But in the CSS layer, we refer to it as party mode, or let's say, let's go back to party, right? So because again, notice that even if we toggled here now, back and forth, there's nothing turning red because our CSS was hard-coded to, yeah, that's in index, oops, that's in index.html, but it was hard-coded to party, not to party mode. I mean, if we change that to party mode and save that and refreshed, then, oh, sorry, maybe now I changed it in the other end. Party, yeah. So if the party class is equal to party mode, and then refresh, then of course that works as well, right? It's just that these two things have to be the same thing still. But okay, let's go back to just party instead of party mode. Let's undo here as well, and then let's go back here, right? So I think maybe let's undo backwards because it's starting to look a bit messy. But before we do that, let's just read what happens in the next section, right? So what they're saying is that you can also conditionally render, right? You can also put a ternary expression. So if you're in this, we probably shouldn't do, but let's say, remember how I could put a string here instead, right? So instead of referring to party class, let me just go back and put the string party, right? That should be the same thing, because then we're saying like just add the string party, and that string party is essentially the party class. I mean, the party class is called party essentially. So that works. But we could do this. We could say if, let's see now, if party is true, right? So if party, so party question mark, then add the party class, else add just an empty string, right? This is a ternary expression. If I refresh now this is not red, but it's now conditioned upon this idea of party mode. So it follows whether party mode is true or not. And I think actually this sort of makes me think that there are a bunch of different ways of dealing with conditions in Vue in your using when dealing with your CSS, right? You can sort of put it in a computed property. You could put it strictly in the model. Actually, maybe not really like the model, but at least you can put it. You can have your classes or your styles as a computed property, and then deal with conditions there, or you could deal with your conditions directly in the view, in the template here, right? Spontaneously, it just seems to me that it would make sense generally to favor putting it as computed properties. But I don't know, right? Like that just seems like one of these things that when your application starts to grow at scale, you will probably thank yourself for having put these things as computed properties rather than hard coding them into the template. But I don't know, right? I mean, this is tricky. I mean, I see the so for example this thing, right, that we did I think last time, right, of setting party mode to the inverse of itself, and we tried it out some other time as well, or we tried it out in a different episode. I mean, I see the, what do you say, like the oof, I'm struggling for an adjective, but oof, I can't remember. But I can see how you'd really want to do this, right? It's tempting, right? Like it's really tempting to do this, and I'm not sure if it's really a bad idea, right? Because like it's so simple that maybe it's just simpler to put it here, you know? Maybe not. I don't know. We'll have to see. This is sort of, I think one needs to experiment a bit with Vue and build some larger applications, and then it's easier to have an opinion about really where things should go. Maybe there are some blog posts, but anyways. Okie dokie. Where were we? So yeah, we talked about this. We talked about the ternary expressions, and then they're saying, of course, putting a bunch of ternary expressions, right? Because notice also, I mean, the number one thing we should notice is that if we put empty string here, they're not sort of strangely rendering some kind of empty string as a class. We are now at the UL, so we should look here, right? We have the class attribute, but we don't have any classes. So empty string is not rendered, as a class, right? So if I put a bunch of empty strings here, it's not like we get anything strange. We just like they're not actually outputting any classes. So let me undo backwards here to this party mode. So that's why we have this empty string here, because if it's a ternary expression, there needs to be something for the else case. We can't just have something for the true case, or for the if true case, right? But again, like, they're emphasizing that it's a bit tricky if we start to put a bunch of conditions here, right? Like, it's like, well, I want to add the class party if the variable party is true, and then I want to add the class well, I don't know, foo if party is or let's say like clickable, right? Or like active, right? Let's say active if party is true but else empty string, right? Like this quickly sort of becomes unreadable. So that's, we really don't want that, right? We always want to manage readability, sort of keep simplicity high, keep complexity low, right? Favor simplicity at all times. Like when you're sort of seeing two choices, err on the side of simplicity, right? Like make sure that you, like, as soon as we lose simplicity, complexity starts to grow in our application, and as complexity grows in our application, it becomes increasingly difficult to manage it, and sort of technical debt grows, and like whenever there's something we want to do, like the number like the danger of introducing something new or trying to fix some kind of bug or changing something just like grows massively, right? So it's really important to always try to keep simplicity high. I'm not sure if you can say keep simplicity high, but I think you really see what I mean. Anyways. So what are they saying? What's the alternative? Well, if you don't want to do that, if you don't want to put a bunch of ternary expressions, you can also use this. So this is, again, emphasizing that what we are looking at here is just an expression. So instead of inlining the array here, you could of course just say, what is this? Like cart items. So let's say cart item style, right? Let's bind to that. Let's go to main.js, and then let's add. So we had a computed property which is title style. So let's now have a, what was that? Cart items style, right? And that's a function because it's a computed property. So, and that will return something. And what will it return? Well, what did we used to say? We used to say that, so we used to say this. So it returns an array that contains, what was it? If party, if this dot party, so now we have to say this because we're in this context. If this dot party is true, then render the string party, otherwise render the empty string, right? Let's just make sure that that works. Yeah, that works. If we set party mode to true, it suddenly is added, and if it's false, it's not added, right? Let's actually, because so in the title style here, I changed it because we're sort of abstracting away or abstracting out this idea of the party class. Let me skip doing this just for the sake of simplicity here, so that we have less things to, or fewer things to look at, right? So let me instead just say return an object where party. Yeah, where we essentially say party colon party, or party colon this party, right? So the class, the CSS class party should be rendered if the model attribute this.party is true. So this means we can remove the party class here as well. Let me just search for party class to make sure that I haven't forgotten anything. No, we don't have any more instances of that. So if I've saved that, and let me just double check, I've saved that, and then let's refresh, and let's just check that this works still, right? Top one blinks red, and the bottom one blinks red, right? We can still sort of activate and deactivate party mode. Okay, super good, right? But that's not actually what they said. So I just started to take this array and move it into a computed property. That's not what they were saying here. It's just that we were reflecting over the fact that what they will say next is completely logical if you think about the fact that we're just sort of expressing an expression here. So we could move that to a computed property, no problem. But what they're saying is that it's also possible to use object syntax inside array syntax. So instead of doing this array of this, and of course, I mean, actually, let's be frank here. I think we probably don't even need the array. Let's delete that. Let me just delete the brackets and see if that works still. Yeah, of course that works still, right? So if you pass a single string if you bind to a model property that renders a single string, then that is the class that will be rendered. If you bind to a model property that gives you an array, then every item in that array is a possible property that will be added, or actually a possible set of properties, but we'll get to that. And if you bind to an object, then that will give you a set of properties where the keys are the names of the classes and the values determine whether those classes should be present in the element or not. And so what they're saying then is that if you have this array syntax, you can actually just mix that with an object. So instead of expressing it this way, let me just write on another line here, right? You have an array and then you have objects inside here. And then we can say, I want to have the party class if this dot party happens to be true. So notice how we're doing exactly the same thing as up here, right? Let me put that on one line so it's obvious. So here in title style, we are returning this object. But in cart item style, we are returning an array that happens to contain a single object. Now this works as well. So if I refresh, let me just make sure I save. Let me save, refresh. And let's click the button, and you can still works, right? But the key point is, of course, that we can now mix. So we could say, well, this array contains this object that conditionally renders the party class, but maybe it also contains like the foo class, or let's say I don't know, like let's just put some stuff, it doesn't matter, right? Like it also puts the active class on there. So let's refresh and let's check that out, right? So you can see then, here's the list, here's that UL element, right? And the class property points to the class or contains the class active, right? So active is always there because we've returned this array that always contains the string active. Nice, right? And if I say set party mode to true, then again, it manages this concatenation with the thing that's always there and the thing that's not always there. So then we get party and we get active, right? Because party was conditionally rendered on the basis of this property being true, right? And like maybe let's even do this. Let's say the active also depends on this dot party. So let's do it maybe that way. So like that, and then active here should be, I mean, it doesn't matter, right? I mean, it's like, let's say bold, or like, let's say important, right? Something like, I don't know, who cares? And then let's refresh. Then you can see we should have, so now we only have important because important is the only sort of static class that we have here. But whenever we set party mode to true, we should get 2 more classes, right? And we do. We get party and we get active because both of those two, or both of them are dependent on this dot party or are conditionally rendered on the basis of this dot party. So that's pretty good, right? I'd say that's pretty good. And of course, then I mean, maybe you would ask yourself like, well, why would I need multiple objects? I don't know. Again, like maybe because of things from different sources. So again, like you might want to mix in some base styles with some sort of styles that you have at hand, right? So let's do this, right? So let's say, what if we have a computed property which is party style? So let's just introduce this, right? And party style returns this object, right? That just says party conditionally rendered on the basis of the variable party. Let me put that on one line, right? That means the title style simply returns party style. And cart item style returns what? Well, it returns this dot party style. Sorry, so I missed this here. This dot party style. So in cart item style, it returns this dot party style, but it also returns an object where active is rendered if this dot party. Okay, and then it renders important. So let's save that. Let's refresh. This should work. Come on. Yes, it works, right? So I'm trying to emphasize that you can you can sort of code share using using sort of composition by by putting multiple things inside an array, multiple objects inside an array. You can have multiple styles. Pretty good. Actually, let's just think about this. This would be pretty cool. I'm wondering whether you can actually put arrays in arrays. Let's say important, and then this class. Let's just say foo. And then a class called bar. So now we have an array and an array. Does that actually work? Ooh, wow, cool. Okay, so that actually works. Let's do an array and an array and an array. Okay, so can you say important and then foo, and then maybe another array here, bar. So close that, and close that. Do we get all of them? Wow. Okay, I'd say that's pretty cool. So the point is, you can return maybe then we can conditionally render a whole bunch of things. So then we can say, if active, then I want to render let's say important let's just put all of them here now. So important, party, and active. Okay, so we're sort of mixing these different things. Does that work? Let's refresh that. I set party mode to true. Wait, actually active is there from the beginning. No, sorry. Sorry. It was incorrect to me. I said that it's rendered on the basis of active being true. But actually, this behavior is a bit surprising still. But I should have said that it's dependent on party. So it's conditioned on party. This isn't really what I was expecting. Yeah, no, okay. This we can't do. Right? I'm not misunderstanding this, am I? No. Oof. My bad. It's exactly the opposite. Ooh, too bad. Too bad. I think there's a solution for this, but I got confused because what I assumed was that this is the condition and this is these are the classes, but it's actually exactly the opposite, right? It's exactly the opposite. It's that the left-hand side is the name of the class and the right-hand side is the condition. So then we can't do that. That was unfortunate. But yeah, at least what we can do is we can say like this, right? We can say party depends on this.party being true, active depends on this.active party being true, and so forth, right? So yeah, we have to tack them on like that. But who cares? That's good enough. But yeah, what I was trying to say is that if you have a bunch of different style containers, let's call them, so like class structures, and here I don't mean class as in object-oriented class, I mean class as in CSS classes. If you have some classes in arrays, maybe with some logic, and some classes in objects, and so forth, you can sort of mix these, right? And you don't have to worry about flattening these structures so that they all follow the same, so that they're all sort of on the top level, right? You can actually just tack them on, right? Which spontaneously seems extraordinarily useful, because then you can mix sort of local dependencies with imported dependencies. So like you've required a file that specifies some some style classes, and then you don't have to think about whether you at any given moment in time in the computation, if you are at the top level of that particular array, let's say, or I guess that particular object. No, not that particular object. You can't nest the objects, right? Because for the objects, as we just showed, then you're actually specifying the name of the class immediately, and then it's just a condition. But for an array, you can have an array and an array and an array and so forth, and you don't have to worry about that. Now, I'm not sure if I assume that's intended, right? Because spontaneously it seems that that's pretty useful, because then we don't have to think about merge, like doing sort of deep merges, which again, like, is unnecessary because it's sort of cruft, right? It's better if we can just not have to think about that. Seems like that. Okay, anyways, let's move on. So did we cover what they were saying here? Yeah, you can mix in objects inside of these arrays and that works fine. Super good. So in the next section, we are going to talk about components, but presumably it's better that we just stop now and that we talk about components tomorrow. Thanks a ton for watching. I'm glad to have you along on this journey into Vue land. Let me know in the comments if you find anything confusing, or if you have a preemptive solution to this problem that I posed of saying that I want to render these bunch of classes on the basis of this thing being true. I mean, maybe we could just extract a computed property and then return an array from that, but I was thinking maybe there is. Yeah, and then I was thinking I think I saw something in the documentation, but then that's this thing. It's multiple values. That's more about prefixed. So yeah, we'll see. Maybe that comes up later. Where were we? Object syntax, array syntax. Oh, sorry. This is for here. This is where we were. It's so confusing. Okay, array syntax. And we've closed that, and in the next one we are going to talk about components. Thanks a ton for watching. Hit the like button if you appreciate it. Dudes, share this video or share this video series with your friends if you think that you have a friend that needs to learn Vue or maybe wants to learn Vue. Anyways, I will see you in the next one. Thanks a ton for watching.